Hi there, my name is Robbie Stakelum and I am a mindset and performance coach. I work with clients to support their career development and to facilitate career change. At the heart though, what I do with my clients is helping them make healthy, positive, but most importantly, sustainable changes in their lives. And one of the biggest challenges they often face is around decision making. So today I'm sharing 4 tips for how we can make better decisions. Just to say, this training is accompanied with a free downloadable workbook on my website at robbiestakelum.com. So if you find from the tools I'm going to share today there's something that's particularly interesting, you can download the workbook and apply some of these tools to the situations that you find yourself in. The first thing I want to say, the first tool in fact I want to share, is around the decision-making spectrum. And so often what I find with clients, and I find this myself in my own experience, that when I'm faced with a decision, I tend to go and focus on how irreversible that decision is and how consequential it is. And so often when you're faced with a decision, part of the reason why it feels so overwhelming is you tend to look at it as once you take that decision, it can never be reversed. That's your decision, that's it for life. Now, of course, that's not rational because actually the vast majority of decisions we take in life are totally reversible. But the same thing with how consequential a decision is. Sometimes when we're so focused on a decision and we have tunnel vision and we really narrow our focus, it feels like the decision is so consequential that we could never really make a decision because the impact would be huge. And so what I try and support my clients in doing is to focus on this decision-making spectrum. When you are jumping to what's irreversible and consequential, that is the emotional part of the brain speaking, and what we want to do here is to activate the rational part of the brain. And we want to go from the subjective, thinking this is irreversible and so consequential, to actually focusing on, is this really? And so what I find this tool is a great way of snapping out of that thinking. So, for example, if we think of something like childbirth and parenthood, that probably sits down here on the graph in that it is pretty irreversible and it is enormously consequential. But there is actually very few decisions in life that sit into this quadrant. Often they fit in the other 3. I was working with a client recently and they're moving country to change jobs. Obviously that felt incredibly overwhelming, and the reason it felt overwhelming was they were sitting in this lower left-hand third quadrant. But when we dug into it and we started coaching on it, what they realized is actually the decision is consequential, yes, moving countries, but it was also pretty reversible. And so for them, rather than sitting in the left-hand quadrant when they coached on it, it kind of sat over here on the right-hand side, in that it's totally reversible. The decision might be consequential and might have big impact, but if they don't like it, they can go back. They can move countries. It might take time, it might take money, but it is not something they have to stick with forever. Similarly, I had a client recently who was changing jobs. And again, the instinct, the gut reaction was sitting down here around the irreversible part of the decision and it being incredibly consequential. But when we spoke about it, when we asked, dug into it a little bit, it actually sat up around here in that, yes, the decision has consequences, but they still work 9 to 5. They still have a salary. They can still pay their mortgage. They can still have a healthy attitude with work, but they might also have more time with their family. And so when they actually looked at it, it wasn't as consequential a decision, but it was also more reversible, that if they do move and for whatever reason they don't like it, they can reverse it. Maybe they don't reverse it back to the job that they had all along, but they can reverse the decision and go to another job. So they're not stuck there for life. And so I just feel like this decision-making spectrum is a great starting point. Is to, if you feel like you're really caught up in a decision, hit pause, map out this spectrum, these kind of graphs, this quadrant, and challenge yourself. Where does this really sit? And how reversible is your decision? And in the bigger scheme of things, how consequential might your decision be? The second thing I want to share is this analogy of what makes your boat go faster. This is, I guess, a motto that I've borrowed from the British Olympic rowing team in the run-up to the London Olympics, the team had this motto of what makes a boat go faster. And they used this as a question that framed all the decisions that they were going to take. They wanted to win the gold, therefore they had to be the fastest boat. Therefore, the question they kept coming back to when they were looking at team composition, training, strengthening, recovery, diet, socializing, it was all about what makes a boat go faster. And so what I often say to clients is that when we think about decisions, sometimes again we get this tunnel vision and we're looking only at this decision as a standalone challenge or problem you're facing, but it sits in a wider context of your life. And so often these decisions are framed around wider goals, aspirations, dreams, objectives you might have. And so one of the things I do with clients is to actually dig into those a little bit, because they can help frame your decision in a healthier way. For example, if you're trying to save for a mortgage at the moment, or you're looking at spending more time with your family, or you want to go traveling, framing the decisions that face you around what makes the equivalent of your boat go faster is a great way to kind of open up those decisions. And you might find that it becomes easier because they're tied to a wider direction that you're moving in or a journey that you're on. And so they feel like they're a little bit more real and practical, and you can tie them into your life a bit better. The third thing I want to share with you is a saying that a coach of mine often uses. The best decision you can take is the right decision. The second best decision you can take is the wrong decision. And the worst decision you can take is indecision. And I think there's probably a lot more nuances to this, but the key message from this phrase is simply that you don't always know what the right decision is going to be. There's no equation for life. Something can make total sense on paper and then you do it and it works. Sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't, because that's just how life works. And we can get so caught up in making that right decision that what we end up doing is sitting with this paralysis of choice, paralysis of decision, where nothing changes. But when you stay at the same place and other people are moving on with their lives, they're developing, they're progressing, sometimes it feels like you're not that you're not moving forward, but sometimes you feel like you're moving backwards. And so one of the things I try to support my clients with is to understand that actually you need to sometimes just experience the decision and to just go out there and see. And even if it's the wrong decision, it's often better than not making any decision, because you've probably learned something about what works or what doesn't work for you. And the final tip I want to share with you is around identifying what's rational and irrational. Often I find with my clients that what underlies indecision is a fear. Sometimes it's a fear of failure, a fear of embarrassing yourself, it's ego, it's pride, it can be a lot of different issues. And sometimes what we try and do is we shut them down, we put them out of sight, out of mind, and we try not to engage with them. But the more that we do that, what often happens is you begin to think about them more, you ruminate on them, you overanalyze them. But because they sit in the emotional part of the brain rather than the rational part of the brain, what happens is the more you repeat them, the more they feel like a truth and they feel like a fact, and that's not often the case. And what I often advise my clients to do is to actually, and it's not the most comfortable thing to do all the time, but it's to lean in and to identify what are some of these fears that you have. And when you do, you can start looking at what is irrational in your fears and what is rational. And it's a really powerful exercise, because the irrational stuff, once you identify they're irrational, when you say them out loud, when you speak to them with a coach, when you're journaling, when you're talking to a friend, and you start to think, oh my God, this is so crazy, I can't believe I'm thinking this. There's no way this would actually happen in reality. It's totally irrational. You can just let go of it and you feel less burdened and less stressed, and it might be easier to make decisions. On the other hand, if you find things that are sitting over in this column on rationality, well, actually what can often happen there is that's a great stepping stone for coaching, for action planning, and to start looking at how you can manage some of those risks. How can you manage some of those fears in a more rational way? Those are just 4 tips I use. I personally, my own experience, I found them very profound and very powerful, but I often find with my clients, depending on the circumstance, they work really well. So what I would advise is to download the workbook that accompanies this training. And if you have any questions, please feel free to get in touch. I'm on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Twitter, there's my email address. You can book a free discovery call with me. You can look into doing one-to-one coaching, joining a group coaching program with me, or doing organizational coaching at your office. And I hope you found this training insightful, helpful, and some of these tools useful to you.